Let me ask you something up front. Have you ever felt like a stranger in your own family? Like no matter what you achieved, no matter how hard you tried to shine, you were still invisible? If that question stings, then you might understand a fraction of what Amber Harrison lived through. I've spent years listening to stories about marriages falling apart, about broken trust between partners, about betrayal behind closed doors. But some of the most devastating betrayals I've come across didn't happen between spouses, they happened between siblings. Between children and the very parents who were supposed to protect them. Amber's story doesn't begin with violence. It begins in the quiet, soul-eroding silence of indifference. And that, my friend, is often more dangerous than any outburst. Amber grew up in a neatly trimmed suburban neighborhood in Ohio, in a house that, from the outside, looked like a postcard. Two parents, a younger brother, family dinners, birthday parties. And yet, behind those curtains, a quiet hierarchy ruled. Tyler, the charming, athletic, social butterfly, was the golden child. The one everyone smiled at a little longer, cheered for a little louder. And Amber, she was the shadow standing behind the spotlight. She was the kind of girl who built computers at age 10 and coded her own math games for fun. Her room was covered not in pop star posters, but in formulas and diagrams. While other girls painted their nails, Amber debugged lines of code. She was exceptional, brilliant, focused, introverted, but none of it seemed to matter. You see, when Tyler scored the winning touchdown, there were balloons and cake. When Amber got into the University of Michigan on a full scholarship for computer science, her mother barely looked up from her phone. When she won her department's award for research, her father asked, "Does that come with any prize money?" And when the answer was no, he changed the subject to Tyler's new truck. Year after year, she watched as her efforts were treated like polite background noise to the never-ending celebration of Tyler's life. It wasn't that they hated her. Difference isn't hatred, it's colder. It tells you, without saying a word, that you don't matter. And it leaves marks, but Amber didn't give up. That's not who she was. Instead, she climbed higher. A master's program in advanced computational algorithms, a thesis that had the potential to impact real healthcare solutions, early detection of diseases through predictive data modeling. While Tyler dropped out of community college and worked construction jobs for cash, Amber stayed up late optimizing machine learning patterns. Still, her weekly calls with her family were more of the same. Tyler just got back from Vegas. How's the computer stuff? Oh, your brother met someone new. You should really relax more. You're so serious all the time. You see where this is going. I've seen this dynamic before. In marriages, one partner keeps the family emotionally alive while the other drains them. In families, it's often the high-functioning child who gets emotionally abandoned because they're fine, but they're not fine. Not when their wins go unnoticed, and their cries are met with rolled eyes. Amber was holding her entire future together with two hands, and no one in that house had the decency to see it. And then, because fate always has a dark sense of irony, she returned home for one final stretch, spring break. Just 1 week, that's all she needed to finish her thesis. A few quiet days in the house she once called home. A house she hoped, just once, might finally support her instead of suffocate her. What she didn't know was that this visit wouldn't give her the closure she hoped for. It would tear open wounds she didn't know still bled. What happened next would shake the foundation of everything she thought she could count on. And I promise you, by the end of this story you'll understand just how dangerous it is to ignore someone's light for too long. Because one day, that person stops waiting for you to see them, they burn on their own. Before we move on to the rest of this story, and trust me, it only gets more shocking from here, if you find value in stories that reveal the hidden truths behind families, relationships, and resilience, please consider subscribing to this channel. Your support helps us keep sharing stories that matter. Stories that reflect not just what we live but what we often bury. Now, let me ask you something deep. Question for you. If you had to choose, which pain would you rather endure? A. Being treated as if you don't exist by the people you love most. B. Being constantly compared to someone else and never measuring up. Type your answer in the comments, or B. I'd love to hear how you feel. There's no right or wrong, just real, honest reflection. Now take a breath, because in the next part, we'll step into the moment everything Amber built was shattered ... with a single, deliberate act. They say it only takes a moment to destroy something that took years to build. A single careless sentence, one reckless action. And suddenly, the life you've been stitching together thread by thread begins to unravel at your feet. Amber Harrison never thought her entire future would collapse in less than 10 seconds. But that's exactly what happened, not at the hands of a stranger. Not because of a natural disaster, but because of her own brother Tyler who, in one impulsive, alcohol-fueled act, shattered 18 months of meticulous work, and with it, something even more fragile, trust. Let me walk you through that day, not because it's pleasant, but because it's important. Amber had come home for spring break not to relax, but to work. She had 1 week left to submit her master's thesis, the culmination of a year and a half of research, coding, long nights, and mental discipline. Her algorithm, designed to identify early markers of disease through healthcare data, wasn't just an academic project. It was the kind of work that could change lives. Maybe even save them. She'd planned this trip carefully. Her parents had assured her the house would be quiet, that she'd have the space she needed to finish. She believed them, she wanted to believe them. Because deep down, she still hoped her family might finally support her, even if only this once. But reality had other plans, or rather, Tyler did. That morning, Amber set up her workspace like a surgeon prepping for an operation. Everything was arranged, notebooks, sticky notes color-coded by urgency, laptop centered, playlist queued up to block out distractions. She was deep into final revisions when the front door slammed and Tyler's voice boomed through the house. Amber blinked at her screen, momentarily confused. Her parents had said he'd be working all day. He wasn't. Instead, he had arrived with beer in one hand and 2 old high school friends flanking him like shadows. Amber heard laughter, heavy footsteps, doors swinging open, furniture being moved. Music followed, loud, insistent, disruptive. At first, she tried to ignore it, earbuds in, focus narrowed. But the walls seemed thinner than usual, or maybe her patience was. She opened her door and found Tyler in the hallway, yelling something about a Bluetooth speaker. When she asked him calmly, rationally to please lower the volume so she could work, he laughed in her face. "You're always working," he slurred, half mocking. "You should try having a life." She tried to reason with him, again, told him this wasn't just homework. This was her master's thesis. This was her future. She just needed a few more hours of peace. But Tyler didn't want to hear it, neither did his friends. Their smirks were the kind of cruelty that only comes from people who feel entitled to someone else's space, someone else's silence. And here's the part that stings the most. Amber still gave him the benefit of the doubt. Still believed, perhaps naively, that if she just explained herself one more time, if she made her case well enough, they'd understand. They didn't. By mid-afternoon, the house had turned into a frat party. Amber, overwhelmed, stepped downstairs to grab a glass of water and tried again to talk to Tyler. This time, he barely looked at her. His friend Jake sneered, "Dude, your sister's such a buzzkill," and Tyler didn't defend her. Instead, he doubled down. "The world doesn't revolve around your stupid thesis," he snapped. That was the moment Amber stopped pleading. She knew better. She returned to her room, closed the door, and tried to focus again. But something shifted after that confrontation. Tyler turned up the music even louder. It was his way of asserting dominance, of punishing her for daring to ask for consideration. A petty act of control. When their parents came home around 5 p.m., Amber expected rescue. Surely, they'd see what was happening. They'd put a stop to it. They didn't. Her mother greeted the party with a delighted laugh. Her father joked with Tyler's friends like they were family. The noise continued, unbothered by Amber's desperation. And when she quietly asked for help, they brushed her off. "Maybe you should have stayed at school," her father said. "This is family time," her mother added. It wasn't just a lack of support, it was a dismissal of her reality, a denial of her urgency. Amber returned to her room with the kind of helplessness that settles deep in your bones, but she still hadn't given up. She still believed if she could just make it through one more night, she'd find a way to finish. And then, the door burst open, no knock, no warning. Just Tyler drunk, swaggering, flanked by his entourage stumbling into her sanctuary. This wasn't a visit, it was an invasion. You know what your problem is, he sneered. You don't know how to have fun. Amber asked him to leave, politely, even then. But he wasn't interested in leaving. He wanted to provoke her, to humiliate her. His friend Brandon started touching her academic awards, mocking them. Tyler stood behind her, too close, breathing down her neck, his voice slurred and aggressive. She tried to de-escalate, promised she'd come down after finishing her work. But Tyler was already gone, lost in some twisted cocktail of resentment, alcohol, and years of unspoken sibling rivalry. He looked at her laptop. This is it, huh? He said, narrowing his eyes. The precious Thesis. Amber's heart dropped. Her instinct kicked in. She hit save, as always, just in case, and then he grabbed it. She lunged, begged, screamed. He didn't care. With one vicious slam, he brought the laptop down on the hardwood floor. It cracked open, lifeless. Then, for good measure, he stomped on it. The screen splintered under his heel, her work 18 months of brilliance lay in pieces. Tyler laughed. Jake and Brandon, suddenly sober, stepped back. One of them muttered, "Dude, that was messed up." Amber fell to her knees, holding the shattered machine like a wounded animal. She didn't cry for long. She stood up, clutching the broken pieces to her chest, and ran. Straight to her parents. Surely, now, they'd step in. They didn't. Her mother sighed. "You're too sensitive." Her father chuckled. "These things happen. Maybe you should have backed it up." They stood there, arranging party snacks while Amber stood bleeding in silence. Not physically, but something inside her was torn, ripped open by the cruelty of being hurt, and then blamed for the pain. And that, right there, was the moment something cracked, not in the machine, but in her soul. Amber had just learned the ugliest truth of all. Sometimes, the people you expect to protect you are the ones who stand by while you're destroyed. And yet this wasn't the end of her story, it was the beginning. And in the next chapter, you'll witness what happens when a woman with nothing left to lose decides she rebuild alone, if she must, but stronger than ever. Because no matter how loud Tyler's slam was, it wasn't the final word, not even close. Sometimes, the biggest turning points in life don't come with fireworks or applause. They come quietly, in bathrooms behind locked doors, with your back against the wall and your heart split wide open. They come when everything you thought you could count on collapses, and all that remains is the voice inside you asking, "Now what?" That was the place Amber found herself in the night her brother destroyed her thesis. Sitting on the cold tile floor, clutching the shattered pieces of her laptop, listening to the sounds of celebration downstairs as if her life hadn't just been upended. She cried, yes, but it wasn't just grief, it was betrayal. And not just from Tyler, that was the most visible wound. But the deeper cut came from her parents' indifference, their laughter. Their refusal to see the wreckage not only of her computer, but of her dignity, her effort, her worth. It would have been easy for Amber to give up right there, many would have. Most might have quietly packed their bags and disappeared into a life of bitterness and silence. But something stirred in her that night, not rage, not revenge, but something colder and sharper, resolve. And that's what I want to talk about, because in every love story, in every marriage, in every family, we all face moments where we're left standing in the ruins of something we worked so hard to build. What you do in that moment, when the easy route is surrender, defines everything. Amber dried her tears. She didn't scream. She didn't go back downstairs to argue. She didn't beg for justice one more time. She picked up her phone and called the only person she could think of who might understand the magnitude of what had happened, Rachel. Now, Rachel wasn't a best friend or a sister-like figure. They were more like distant acquaintances, college classmates who had occasionally shared a study group and a few late-night coffees. But in that moment, Amber remembered something about her. Rachel had always taken her work seriously. And that alone made her feel safer than her own family. When Rachel picked up and heard Amber's trembling voice, her reaction was swift, shocked, outraged, but also calm. She offered a couch, a roof, a way out. And just like that, Amber had her first act of real support since the incident. Packing that night was surreal. Walking past her parents and Tyler without saying a word, without explaining herself again. She moved like a ghost, unseen, untouched, unnoticed. And maybe for the first time, that invisibility worked in her favor. They didn't stop her, they didn't even look up. At Rachel's apartment, the welcome wasn't grand. It was simple: tea on the table, a blanket on the couch, and a presence that said, "I believe you, and sometimes that's all we need." Just one person to not question the story, to not downplay the pain. Amber didn't sleep much that night. Her mind raced with the pieces she had lost, both literally and figuratively. Not just the code, the conclusions, the research files, but time, the opportunity, reputation. How would she explain this to her advisor? Would anyone believe her? Rachel, with the quiet steadiness of someone who's been through her own battles, urged her to do what needed to be done. Email Professor Martinez, be honest, show the damage, ask for help. And so she did. With shaking fingers, Amber wrote what had happened. She attached photos of the shattered laptop. And she waited. The reply came early the next morning. It wasn't just sympathetic, it was fierce. "Amber, what happened to you is unacceptable. This is not your fault. Come to my office at 9 a.m. We will figure this out." There are emails that change lives. This was one of them. At the university, Professor Martinez met her not just as a mentor, but as an ally. She didn't sugarcoat the situation. The hard drive might be salvageable, but there were no guarantees. The deadline loomed large. But the resources were now in Amber's hands: 24/7 lab access, a powerful workstation, and most importantly, belief. When the IT technician, Raj, opened the destroyed laptop and gently removed the hard drive, Amber stood still. It was like watching a surgeon trying to revive a flatlined patient. Hours passed, hope flickered. Finally, Raj looked up. "I think I can recover about 80%. 80%, not everything, not the final optimized sections, not the freshly written conclusion, but it was enough to fight for." From that moment, Amber entered what I can only describe as survival mode. Not of the body, but of the spirit. 16-hour workdays, cold vending machine dinners, power naps on a cot in the lab's break room. She shut off her phone, she shut out the noise. And in that silence, something unexpected began to bloom: clarity. Every night, Professor Martinez came by to check on her progress, offer feedback, and remind her that she wasn't alone. Rachel brought her clean clothes, coffee, and moments of lightness. Even classmates Eliza, Jordan, Matt showed up. They had heard, they understood, they had faced their own thesis disasters, though none quite like this. They came, not out of pity, but out of solidarity. Together, they helped her troubleshoot, rewrite, reformat, and rebuild. Amber no longer begged for her family's approval, she no longer sought their recognition. Her worth was no longer tethered to people who couldn't see it. And that, right there, is what transformation looks like. Not fireworks, not vengeance, but quiet determination in a cold lab, under harsh fluorescent lights, surrounded by strangers who had become something more. Proof that support doesn't always come from where we expect, but that doesn't mean it won't come at all. By the end of the week, Amber was exhausted, emotionally drained, and operating on adrenaline alone. But she wasn't broken, not anymore. She was standing on something new, her own strength. And sometimes, the most beautiful kind of breakthrough only comes after something inside you has been completely, irrevocably broken. Next, you'll see what happens when a woman like that, betrayed, doubted, underestimated, walks into a courtroom and takes back her power. Because for Amber, survival wasn't enough, she came to win. There's something quietly powerful about a woman who has nothing left to prove but everything left to protect. Amber Harrison had been through the kind of storm that doesn't just shake you, it reshapes you. And now, standing at the edge of her deadline, eyes tired, heart bruised but steady, she didn't ask herself if she could do it, she already knew she would. Her algorithm was rebuilt, her conclusion rewritten, her citations checked and polished. She had worked through days that blurred into nights and back into days again. Her body was running on caffeine and willpower. But her mind had never been sharper. On the final morning before the submission deadline, Amber stood in the quiet glow of the university lab, staring at the last draft of her thesis, 157 pages. Rewritten, refined, reborn, it wasn't just a paper anymore. It was a monument to survival, a declaration that she had endured the worst and come out standing. Professor Martinez stood beside her as she uploaded the document to the department portal. The confirmation message blinked back at them from the screen. Submission received. "You did it," Martinez said softly, her voice filled with restrained pride. Amber shook her head. "No, we did it. I couldn't have done this without you." But what neither of them said out loud, though both understood, was this: Amber had done something much harder than completing a thesis. She had reclaimed her voice in a house that tried to silence it. And now it was time to go back, not for reconciliation, but for resolution. Amber returned to her parents' house that same afternoon, not as a daughter looking for approval, but as a woman collecting what was hers, her belongings, her dignity, and her right to hold others accountable for the damage they inflicted. Her mother opened the door, her face painted with a strange mix of relief and annoyance. "Amber, thank God you're home. I'm not staying," Amber replied, stepping past her. She walked up the stairs with quiet authority. Her bedroom was untouched, frozen in the aftermath of that night. Pieces of the broken laptop still lay scattered across the floor. She took pictures. Evidence packed the rest of her belongings with calm precision. There would be no dramatic confrontation until her brother came home. Tyler's voice echoed from the hallway minutes later. "Amber's here," she finally came back. He stepped into the doorway, wearing the same crooked grin he always wore when he thought charm could erase harm. "Hey," he said. "Look, I'm sorry. All right, I was drunk. I didn't mean to actually break it for real." Amber didn't look up. She finished folding her sweatshirt into a box. "So we're good now, right?" he asked, stepping farther into the room. This time, she met his eyes. "No, Tyler, we're not good." His grin faded. "What the hell are you talking about?" Amber reached into her bag and pulled out a folded document. "You've been served," she said. "Small claims court, for destruction of property. I've also filed a police report." Tyler blinked, as if the words hadn't registered. "You're suing your own brother." "I'm holding you accountable," she replied. The next 10 minutes were a cacophony of parental panic. Her mother cried out, horrified. Her father shouted about betrayal and airing dirty laundry. Tyler yelled that she was ruining his life over a damn laptop, but none of it touched her. They were speaking from a world she no longer lived in. She left the house with her boxes, her back straight, her mind steady. 3 weeks later, Amber stood in a courtroom not grand or dramatic, just a small space where truth was quietly sorted from denial. Tyler didn't show. Her parents sat in the back, silent. She presented her evidence with calm clarity: photos of the damage, receipts, documentation of her work hours lost, a statement from the university IT technician, and one from Professor Martinez affirming the academic significance of the files that had been destroyed. The judge listened carefully, asked a few questions, and ruled decisively. Amber was awarded $3,800, the cost of a new laptop, plus damages for lost work and opportunity. It wasn't about the money. It never had been. It was about the principle. For the first time, someone in authority had acknowledged that what happened to her mattered. That it wasn't just family drama, that it was real and wrong. Still, the victory was bittersweet. Her parents left the courtroom without a word, not even a glance. But Amber didn't crumble, not this time. She returned to campus with her check and used part of it to buy a new, top-tier laptop for her upcoming position at TechFusion, a research firm that had reviewed her work, been impressed with her resilience, and was eager to bring her on board. The rest went toward the deposit on a small but bright apartment downtown, her first place that was fully hers. Graduation day arrived with quiet grace. She walked across the stage in her cap and gown, her name called out not just as a graduate, but as one of the few in her program to receive distinction. Professor Martinez clapped from the faculty row. Rachel sat in the audience, tears in her eyes. And beside her Marcus, Rachel's cousin, who had helped Amber with the code recovery and later offered her a job interview of his own. Tyler and her parents weren't there. And surprisingly, that absence no longer hurt, it felt accurate. The people who were meant to be there were there, and that was enough. In love and in family, we are often told to forgive, to forget, to smooth things over. But sometimes, the bravest form of love is the love we show ourselves when we say, "No more." Amber didn't destroy her family, she simply stopped sacrificing herself to maintain the illusion of one. And from the wreckage of that shattered laptop, she built a life no one could break. Healing doesn't come in grand gestures. It arrives slowly, quietly, like the way the sun filters through a window on a morning when you've finally slept well after months of restless nights. That's how it began for Amber Harrison, not with an announcement, not even with a celebration, but with peace. After months of emotional chaos and personal upheaval, her life began to take shape again. Not the life her family expected of her, not the one she once tried to build for their approval, but a life that was entirely her own. The court case was behind her. The thesis had not only been completed but honored. And the email she received the week after her defense changed everything. TechFusion, the healthcare analytics firm that had shown interest before the disaster, had reviewed her newly submitted thesis. They were impressed by the quality of her algorithm, yes, but also by the integrity of her story, the strength of her journey. They offered her a full-time position in their data science division, starting immediately after graduation. Amber accepted, not with giddy excitement, but with the kind of quiet pride that comes from earning something no one can take away from you. She signed the offer letter on her new laptop, the one purchased with the damages Tyler was ordered to pay. A symbolic shift, the very destruction he caused had now funded the beginning of her future. She moved into a small studio apartment near TechFusion's downtown office. It wasn't glamorous second-hand furniture, minimal decor, but it was hers. No one criticized her for working late. No one interrupted her silence. For the first time in years, Amber didn't have to explain herself to anyone. Work became a source of fulfillment. Her algorithm was assigned to a pilot program involving 3 regional hospitals. She spent her days fine-tuning code, analyzing data, and sitting in on medical briefings about the real-world impact of her work. Each time a doctor explained how early detection could save a patient's life, Amber felt something click inside her, like every sleepless night, every insult shrug off, every moment of doubt had led her to this. She was no longer just proving herself, she was contributing something meaningful. But even with the professional success, the personal wounds took longer to heal. Her parents reached out weeks after graduation. Not with apologies, exactly, but with vague gestures of concern. Her mother called late one evening, voice soft and uncertain. "We miss you," she said, "your father and I. We didn't handle things well, we realize that now." Amber listened, guarded but open. She didn't want revenge. She wanted acknowledgement. Her mother continued, mentioning that Tyler had lost his job at their uncle's construction firm and was struggling to find new work. The misdemeanor on his record because of the police report Amber had filed had made things complicated. "He's having a hard time," her mother said. "We thought maybe you could talk to him, help him figure things out. You've always been so good at planning." The irony didn't escape her. For years, her practicality and ambition had been minimized, brushed aside as too serious or too intense. Now, when they needed it, it had value. "I'm not the person to fix this for him," Amber replied gently. "Tyler made his choices, just like I made mine." Her mother paused. "Will we ever see you again?" It was a question laced with sadness, with the fear of a daughter slipping away. Amber didn't answer right away. She didn't want to speak from anger, but from truth. "I'm not cutting you out," she finally said. "But things have to change. I need boundaries, I need respect. And I need you to understand that what happened wasn't just a fight between siblings. It was violence, it was betrayal, and your response, your laughter hurt more than I can explain." "I'm trying to understand," her mother said. That was enough for now. In the months that followed, Amber saw her parents occasionally. A brief lunch here, a coffee shop meeting there. She kept things measured, controlled. Tyler didn't join. Their relationship, if it would ever heal, would require a kind of accountability he hadn't shown yet. And Amber had stopped waiting for it. She had started investing her energy into relationships that gave back. Rachel remained a close friend, a kind of sisterhood formed in fire. Marcus, Rachel's cousin, began to show up more often, not just as a co-worker, but as someone who understood what it meant to rebuild from rubble. Their conversations over Thai food and late-night debug sessions slowly turned into something deeper, something that made Amber feel safe in a way she hadn't felt since childhood. One night, sitting on the balcony of her apartment, Marcus asked her something. "Do you ever regret taking your brother to court, turning your back on your family like that?" She looked out over the city lights before answering. "I regret that it was necessary," she said. "But I don't regret standing up for myself. Sometimes, the hardest thing and the right thing are the same," he nodded, quiet for a moment. "Well, for what it's worth, I think you did exactly what needed to be done. Your work matters. You matter." And there it was again, that thing her family never could quite say. You matter. A year passed. Amber's algorithm was fully integrated into hospital systems across multiple states. It had already flagged early-stage cardiovascular risk in dozens of patients, prompting follow-up and treatment. The work was real, the difference measurable. And for the first time in her life, Amber no longer felt the need to explain what she did or why she did it. She simply lived it. Then one day, an unexpected message arrived in her inbox from Jake, Tyler's old friend, the one who had stood in the doorway the night of the destruction, silent and unsure. "I've been thinking about what happened last year," the message read. "I should have said something then. I knew it was wrong, but I didn't. I'm sorry. Seeing how you handled everything, it made me realize I need to be braver." Amber read the words twice. Not because they shocked her, but because they soothed something small inside her. The recognition didn't change what happened, but it mattered. It reminded her that actions ripple outward. That by standing up for herself, she hadn't just saved her own path, she had lit something for others too. In the end, what Amber rebuilt wasn't just a career or a thesis or a sense of peace. It was a foundation made of truth, boundaries, self-respect, and a new understanding that family isn't just blood. Sometimes, the people who arrive for you in your darkest moments, the ones who believe you, fight for you, and lift you up, are the ones who become your real family. And in that quiet, fiercely built life, Amber didn't just survive, she thrived. When we look at Amber's story, it's easy to get caught up in the drama, the shattered laptop, the courtroom battle, the emotional estrangement from family. But if we step back for a moment and really look beneath the surface, we begin to see something much more profound. This wasn't just a tale of academic perseverance or personal betrayal. It was a journey of rebirth, of claiming self-worth in a place where none was given, of learning that blood alone doesn't define love, and silence in the face of cruelty is a kind of violence too. Amber didn't just rebuild her thesis, she rebuilt herself, piece by piece, hour by hour. Not because someone finally gave her permission, but because she realized she didn't need it. That realization is one of the hardest, yet most liberating, truths we come to as adults. No one is coming to save you. You have to save yourself, and you can. Too often, we're taught to keep the peace at the cost of our peace of mind. We're told that family must be forgiven, no matter what, and that standing up for ourselves is selfish. But Amber's story shows us something different. It shows us that setting boundaries isn't cruelty, it's clarity. That accountability isn't revenge, it's respect for yourself. And that walking away from toxic love isn't abandonment, it's self-preservation. In her darkest moment, Amber chose not to become bitter, she chose to become better. That choice didn't come easily, and it didn't come overnight. It came through sleepless nights, painful truths, and the kind of solitude that breaks and remakes a person. But it came, and with it came a new life, not perfect, not pain-free, but real, earned, honest. The beauty of this story is that it could belong to anyone. Maybe it already belongs to you, maybe you've been the invisible one. The one whose achievements were brushed aside. The one who was asked to be quiet when you should have been celebrated. Maybe you've also been waiting for someone to finally say, you matter. Well, let me say it now, you do, you matter. The truth is, the people who see your worth will never need to be convinced. They'll show up, they'll stay, and more importantly, you need to show up for yourself. That's where real change begins. So what can we learn from this? The lesson is simple, but deep. Your worth is not up for negotiation. You don't need to earn basic respect from anyone, family, partner, or otherwise. If someone consistently disregards your boundaries, mocks your dreams, or undermines your voice, it's not just how they are, it's a pattern. And patterns, left unchecked, shape your reality. So the next time you feel yourself shrinking to make someone else comfortable, pause. Ask yourself, is this love, or is it control? Is this support, or is it silence in disguise? And then act accordingly. Respect yourself enough to walk away from what erodes you, and walk toward what builds you. Amber did. And in doing so, she didn't just write a thesis, she wrote a new chapter in her life, one where she was the author. You can do the same. Let me ask you this, have you ever had to walk away from someone close to protect your peace and well-being? Oh yes, and it was one of the hardest things I've done. B. Not yet, but I've thought about it. Please feel free to share your answer in the comments below. I truly believe when we open up, we help others find courage, too. And if this story moved you, even just a little, I kindly ask you to subscribe to the channel. Your support helps keep stories like this alive. If you'd like to donate even just a small amount to support my work and this channel, it would mean the world to me. I may be older now, but I still believe in doing good, in sharing wisdom that uplifts others. Your contributions help me keep going, to continue making content that's honest, emotional, and hopefully helpful to someone out there who needs it. Thank you for watching, for feeling, and for being part of this little community we are building one story at a time.